Okay, so let's get started. Going to start with our first guest, who's a friend of mine I've known for many years, myself being a musician from Seattle. Please welcome Gabriel Teodros to the stage. Grab one. Just to give you a little background on Gabriel, Gabriel's an Ethiopian-American musician and writer from South Seattle, my side of town. First made his mark on the music industry through a group Abyssinian Creole, and his international debut, which was Love Work. He's been setting stages on fire, has performed in the US, Canada, Mexico, Cuba, Ethiopia, and South Africa. And his latest solo offering, History Rhymes If It Doesn't Repeat, a South End healing ritual, is a collective exercise in moving through trauma that was made completely with his collaborator, Mocha Only. In 2015, Gabriel made his debut as a speculative fiction author when he published in Octavia's Brood, science fiction stories from social justice movements. In 2016, he graduated from the Clarion West Workshop for Speculative Fiction. His writing has been published in The Feminist and OK Africa. He is also a DJ for KEXP, and you can hear him from late Friday night to Saturday morning every week, and he plays the jams. So get with him.
Thanks, guys.
Gabriel Teodros.
Thanks, yeah.
And so our next guest is visiting us all the way from Ghana, West Africa. Please put your hands together for Samini. And so just a little background on Samini. He's a dance hall recording artist from Accra, the capital of Ghana. His music is a mixture of high life, dance hall, reggae, and hip hop. He calls it African dance hall. He's released 7 studio albums that have all been highly successful commercially. He's toured through the UK, Germany, Italy, Canada, and the Netherlands with the likes of Sean Paul, Akon, Damian Marley, Beanie Man, etc. He's received international recognition, winning the Best African Act at the 2006 Mobile Awards, 3 awards in 2007 at the Ghana Music Awards, and in February 2008, he won the African Artist of the Year at the Headies. All right. And so, as you can see, we have some world-class artists today. How you brothers doing?
We're doing great, great.
Yeah. So we'll get another mic for you, Gabe. Thank you guys for being with us. As we mentioned earlier, Kijiji Night is all centered around the concept of the African village as a source of life, a source of power, a source of strength. And so I want to start along the lines of that theme. Can you, starting with Gabe, can you tell us about your background and upbringing, how you developed as a person, as an artist, and specifically touch on the village that nurtured and created you and how that affects your music?
Yeah, so can everybody hear me all right? Yeah, so I was born and raised in South Seattle, born in 1981. My mother's from Ethiopia. My father's Scottish, Irish, Native American, but I grew up in my mother's house. They split up when I was a kid, and my concept of the village starts inside my mom's house. I feel like inside the house and outside of the house were 2 completely different realities. She migrated here on her own from Ethiopia in the late 60s, so before there was a mass migration of folks from Ethiopia. A lot of people in the Ethiopian community call my mom one of the old timers, and they call me one of the first kids, meaning I was like one of the first kids born here. So I grew up basically like in a house where it felt like half of East Africa had a key to our house, you know, literally. And my uncles, my aunts, my cousins, my grandparents, all one by one migrated to the country and lived in my mother's home. And how that impacts my music in so many ways. Just looking at my mom's story, like the idea of success for my mother has never been about individual success, right? Like one person that comes here has the power to bring 10, 15, 20 more. And that idea of family, which extends to that idea of village, is something that's always been a part of the way I approach music and community work. It's that concept of like, I can't be successful on my own unless everyone in my village is doing well, you know? If I'm doing well, but somebody in my village is left out, then I'm a failure. It's still how I feel. So.
I hear you. Samini?
Great. Well, for a second, for a second, I was into the story. I totally forgot that I was a part of this. You know, that's how interesting and touching the story is. I, born and raised in Ghana. Born in 1981, just like my brother here. So that's one thing we have in common, December 1981 is when I was born. Raised in Ghana. I started music at a very early age, like most artists. Most musicians will tell you that I was born to do this. I started this when I was a baby and all of that. So that stereotype already done. And by the end of high school, the only thing that I could look at and feel safe to do was, follow my dream and pre my talent, because there was not much left out there to do after high school. And there was too many good grades and a few ready universities to actually accommodate everybody. And then also comes the issue of finance and everything else. So what I felt safe with was to follow my dream and make sure that I at least go out there and get myself something to eat and something for the family. So I've always been about reach for the highest in everything you do and make sure you go and achieve the best you can with the little or the least you have. So I, have always been inspired by artists who have, stood the test of time and have been able to reinvent themselves over the years and are still relevant today. So all of those things inspire me, and I'm always looking at myself as, if you're here to do music for a living, then you don't look at it as a hit song kind of journey. You're looking at it as a whole lifelong journey where you're going to be going through peak seasons and drought seasons and ups and downs, and you're going to have to prepare yourself to embrace hit songs from other people, embrace uprising young talents, and know how to be able to, merge with what is new and embrace what the future is bringing, and also new ways of doing things, so that you don't find yourself a cake in these times in this new era of internet where everything happens so fast. Because we're coming from the days where there was no Facebook to spread your music. There was no Twitter to go on and rant and be trolled. There was no Instagram to go on there and put a picture on and get a million views. A million hits in 24 hours. So we came from the traditional do good music, put out good material, and attract real core fans. So from them days to today, where a kid in a room can become a superstar over 24 hours by making sure he does the right material and puts it out and gets the right internet time to just put it in people's faces. So now I had to learn how to, migrate, if I should use that word, from analog to this digital age and still stay relevant. And I think I've been able to do that pretty well. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Samini. And so briefly, how did each of you guys connect with One Vibe, and why have you become a part of One Vibe's kind of global village?
Yeah, I met Simon Okello back in 2012, I want to say. He used to do interviews on his website for One Vibe. This is before Madaraka Festival and before any of that. And he interviewed my group Copper Wire, which is with my cousin Makli Hadero and my other brother Burnt Face. We had this like Ethiopian hip hop space opera thing that we were doing. So that was how we first connected. And just on the East Africa in South Seattle connection, that was the initial connect. But it got deeper when we all did. You were a part of it as well. The first year of the Madaraka Festival. I felt like that for Seattle, just like African diaspora, no matter what kind of music you do, I felt like was so historic because we had been having these conversations since we were teenagers, just like you being a Kenyan MC, me being an Ethiopian MC, our guy Yidam Sek, who's from Senegal, just all of us being from different places in Africa, but finding each other through hip hop in South Seattle. Like it's a particularly like different story than a lot of our generation. So just under the One Vibe banner, coming together and doing something collaboratively and collectively, it felt historic because it was the first time we'd actually done that. So I've been very inspired and proud to be a part of One Vibe since then. So, yep.
Word.
Yeah. Well, I got the link with One Vibe in 2000, I think 3 years ago. That would be 2016. During the Madaraka Festival. I was actually introduced to Simon through a friend called Kwasi Tay. If you're in the building, big up yourself everywhere you are. He introduced me to Simon, and then Simon spoke to me about Madaraka and how it was important for, African acts to connect with the African community out here, and then look at what we can take back home to those at home to know what's happening with the people out here and all of that. So I kind of fell in love with the whole concept because it's not always about going into the filled auditoriums where it's fans coming to just jam to music and go. So when you get the chance to associate yourself with something that has something else to do for society and for humanity apart from just a concert, then it's a blessing. So I came on board Madaraka, did the first show 2016, and I was amazed by the collaboration and the cohesion among our people here trying to make this happen. Because if you gonna bear with me, we go to certain African shows and we end up complaining to ourselves about time and a whole lot of other factors. And I realized that Simon was a bit up on his game when it comes to all of these things. So I felt safe to associate myself and my brand with One Vibe and everything else that One Vibe is doing. So hence why I'm here in 2019 still dealing with One Vibe, yeah.
All right, that's dope. And so as you guys know, this event is happening during Black History Month and is a celebration of Black history and African culture. And so we know that Black music is one of the most powerful cultural forces in the world. So speaking as an African from the continent and one from the recent diaspora, Gabe, how has the Black American musical tradition shaped your music, and how has Black history in general in this country affected you and shaped the music you create?
Well, thank you very much. I think I'll take that first. For me, growing up back home, Black American music told us the Black American story of the Black American and how he ended up there. So for those of us who had the ear for conscious music, we wanted to hear stuff with content. So we were listening to the artists that would link you to how they became Black people that just speak English and nothing else but English, and how I became a Black guy that speaks hundreds of tongues. So then I got to know about Black American culture through the music. And then I realized that to be able to do urban music and appeal to the world, you have to be able to tap into all of these Black genres of music like reggae, hip-hop, R&B, jazz, all of that. And then put your African in that. Put all of your African in that, because this is how the world is listening to music now. This is what is appealing to the world now in terms of sound. So if you, involve all of these things and then have Africa as the base, then off you go. So that's how I kind of tapped into that and ended up here.
Okay.
That's what's up. For me, I think just because by virtue of growing up here in South Seattle, and in the time, like I said, there wasn't a huge Ethiopian community in Seattle when I was growing up. People came as I was growing up, so I was more immersed in Black culture from when I was a little kid. Like the first musician I knew by name ever was Aretha Franklin, you know? So for me, it was more like Black music and Black culture in general raised me as much as Ethiopian culture did. I totally grew up in between those worlds, so. You
I completely feel you, Gabe, and, you know, being from the same background, from the same side of town. And so kind of staying on that theme, the people of Ghana and Ethiopia, who you guys represent, have always been kind of at the forefront of, you know, the empowerment for African people and expressing our sovereignty. Whether it's from the Kingdom of Ashanti fighting the British, whether it's from the Empire of Ethiopia expelling the Italians, to what Kwame Nkrumah was doing during independence, with the movements in the continent and the support Haile Selassie gave to all of, and his government gave to all of those movements. So I just want to know, how have these particular legacies affected you in terms of your consciousness and also your music?
Well, as an artist, you need to have a strong history background. So I've always tapped into these things just to be able to know where I'm from and then have a clear idea of where I'm going. So all of these stories, I mean, West Africa has a huge history when it comes to how black people ended up in the West. You know, and East Africa has a huge history when it comes to that untapped part of Africa that was really hard to colonize. So you go down to Ethiopia and you realize that it wasn't that easy for them to do what they did in other places in Ethiopia. So they had to finally pack up and leave. And all those stories kind of inspire me to know how some of us remained on the continent, some of us left through the ships, but finally in 2019, this is the year of return, and we're going back home. Yeah.
Say that. For me, that's a bit of a complicated question. I might say something that's unpopular here right now, but I don't completely buy into the idea that Ethiopia was never colonized. It was never colonized in a traditional sense, that's true, but neocolonialism looks completely different. My mother was growing up in a time when Haile Selassie was in power and their schools were still teaching English. There were still images of a white Jesus inside the house. They still needed to know American history in Ethiopia under Haile Selassie.
Wow.
And all of these ideas of success that are very colonizing were in power in a time when Ethiopia was supposedly never colonized. So all that to say, yes, like growing up, Ethiopian sense of pride in that, you know, we were never colonized has always been something that gave me pride, because it's something that let me know, like, you don't have to assimilate into anything. But I've also felt like, you know what, I also need to push back against this, because there are things that are white supremacist in nature that I've learned from my Ethiopian family that I need to push back against and fight against, especially here in America. So that's something that's always actually kept me, that's kept me motivated in a way, to really research and find more of our history that isn't told, and to also question the things that are given to me, both from Western school, but also my family.
Okay.
So
yeah, thank you.
I'd be complicated, I'm sorry.
I like it, it's deep, it's real. And we need that. And so as Samini mentioned, this is the year of the return that has been declared by the Ghanaian government, because 2019 marks 400 years since the first enslaved African was brought to North America, to Jamestown, Virginia. And one thing that I just learned today is that those enslaved Africans were actually on a Portuguese ship that was going to Mexico and Brazil, that was stolen by pirates, English pirates. And they were then, about 20 to 30 Africans were stolen from that ship and brought to Jamestown, Virginia. And so that pirates brought the first Africans here to North America. This year marks 400 years from that point, and the state of Ghana has declared this the year of return. Ghana, again, since Nkrumah, has always been a leader in terms of Pan-Africanism and welcoming back those ones that were lost. And so I say that to say that 400 years on, we as Africans from the newer diaspora, who are not the descendants of the enslaved, have benefited greatly from the opportunities built by those descendants of the enslaved here and the enslaved communities. 400 years on, in the year of the return, what do you think we as African people should be doing to repay that debt to the African American community? And what kind of investments can we make in helping our people to return?
Well,
That's a beautiful question.
I believe that
That's a good question.
in these times, we need to let them feel at home. let them feel welcome, let them feel belonging in the first place, so that they would feel like coming back home with whatever expertise, whatever knowledge that they've acquired over the 400-year period. So then if we as Africans who remained on the continent aren't up to our game, we can't be able to match the standards of what somebody that's coming from, say, first world, you know. So then we have to be able to let them feel confident enough to work with us and to develop with us. That's to say, we have to be able to embrace computer and IT and be able to match the know-how when it comes to these things, so that when they come home and they're speaking futuristic, there should be some of us who will be able to understand what they're saying and be able to meet them, if not same level, at least halfway, so that they can be able to impact positively whatever it is that they brought, and be able to also tap positively what it is that's here for them or in Africa for them. Yeah, so I believe in we shaping ourselves to be ready for the future, which is us coming together again as a unified people by breaking the code of door of no return to the return year now.
Amen.
I just gotta say, that's a beautiful question, and that's a really important question, and that's a question that people don't ask enough, and it's one that I feel like just the two of us aren't going to be able to answer alone, you know what I mean? But we just need to keep on having these kind of conversations, because I feel like there's no two groups that need each other more, you know what I mean, than the community of just African people on the continent and the ones that have been taken, you know what I mean? So, yeah.
Thank you, Gabe. Thank you. And I'm going to answer my own question also. Well, I think that this represents what we can do, especially those of us like you and I, Gabe, who are, you know, from the later African diaspora, who are born and raised here. We have a foot in both worlds. And so I think it's up to us to be the bridge between our people, to take them home, to make our own people, our African family, understand the story of African Americans and understand the debt that is owed, you know, because there was a book called The Debt, but it doesn't just go one way. You know, there's a lot of us that owe a debt to the African American community. And so what groups like One Vibe try to do is to make that reconnection. One thing we are focusing on is taking people back to the continent. We've taken many artists and just friends and supporters from the Seattle community back to Kisumu and to Kenya, and to start to get our people back home so they can reconnect and to start that process. So if you are one of those people who aspires to do that, I would say to start moving on that today, and we are an organization that can help you do that. And we see it as our duty to do such things, okay? And so we're gonna start to wrap up this discussion. I'd just like to ask you two to each, maybe for this village here, if there's somebody who doesn't know anything about your music, what do you think you would just like them to take away from this conversation, just about you and your music?
Wow.
Yeah, he has some good questions.
I know, right?
These are hard to answer.
I know. I know that these equipments behind me aren't just there for no reason. So if everybody in the house is going to be here till the end of this event, they're definitely going to have a feel of what I am like.
Okay.
Yeah. I could say the same thing. I'm born and raised in Seattle. My music is informed by the musicians that come before me in this town as well as abroad. One of those artists happens to be the guy that's DJing, DJ Topspin.
Big Top.
He's part of tribal music, do the math. If you want to learn anything about me, please study the history of music that's done here in this region. And yeah, I got Shakia that's about to rock with me. My music has never been just about me. It never will be. It's about an entire community and an entire village that help keep me up. That's the most important thing I want people to get from my music, and yeah.
All right, thank you. That was an amazing discussion. You guys, please give a hand to Gabriel Teodros and Samini.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.